Okay, so folks, first of all, welcome. It's a pleasure to be here presenting for this amazing audience. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about how the SRE role is changing, right? And so, given what has been happening in the last couple of years, where we saw LLMs, then agents, and that is all over the place, the same is true for operations, right? And so, this is changing how SREs work. Before we get into that, I want to ask you a couple of things. How many of you have had an incident, a major incident, in the last week? Please raise your hand. In the last month, okay? Last year? Okay, I see some lucky folks in the audience, right? That in the last year, they've never been in an incident. And so as we go through these incidents, you all feel the pain of first being notified, like spending time resolving an issue, but that's not the only consequence, right? The brand erodes, the trust of the customer also erodes. There are probably consequences in terms of costs, revenue for the company. And so it's something that we want to avoid. But the reality is, even in the companies that have the highest levels of reliability with many nines in their SLOs, right? They also have incidents. So it's not a matter of if, but when the next incident is going to happen, right? So today we're going to focus our talk in how can we use this new approach with AI to incident management, right? Because SRE role is quite broad and means different things for different companies. But today we'll focus on the incident management part. And we did a survey last year where we asked more than 1,000 IT leaders, what's the average cost of an incident, right? And this was the number that we got, 800K. Just to give you a sense, this was the average in more than 1,000 enterprises. But if you do all the math and you think about an incident, there's the costs of the people involved in the incident, the costs of the people not being able to buy or access the service, the costs of having to do post-incident reviews, taking actions, all of that, right? So it's a lot of compound costs. And just to give you one example, one of our customers, which is a global customer travel and hospitality, they are global, they sell in hundreds of countries, and one of their websites was down. And they took 6 hours to find out that one of their websites was down. Per hour, they were losing somewhere around this value, right? And what was the problem? No observability. No one had configured a monitor, an alert, so on and so on, right? So the cost it was enormous. Not only that, but we don't want our teams to spend most of the time responding to incidents, right? We want people to be spending their times on building innovation, and we don't want constant interruptions as well, right? Causes burnout. Sometimes these issues are repeated, always the same solution. Oh, this database, this transition failure in this database, let's scale it down. Let me go back to bed. So we want to avoid that from happening. And with AI, I think we have a new opportunity. The same goes for when we think about this. AI is an opportunity, but what new problems do we have? We are now facing situations where people are using agents to code, agents to do operations, agents to do HR, finance, marketing, so all of that, right? So what new failure modes do we have that are rising from this change that we're seeing? And let me give you a couple of examples, right? If the agents are typically based on LLMs are non-deterministic, right? Given how they are built today. And so it's hard to predict when an LLM is going to fail. Many times we have flows and we run these flows once, twice, 3 times, and then at the 4th time it fails, right? And we want to be aware of that. Not only that, but we're talking about natural text interaction. And so it changes based on the context, based on the system prompt that I'm injecting, or based on what was the previous conversation flow. And if we start adding agent to agent communicate, which is I would say, evolving or starting to be something that companies are tackling, then we have situations where we have meshes of agents communicating between them, which creates very unpredictable patterns, right? So when we think about reducing our operation costs so that we focus on building in innovation, how can we do that with AI, given that AI will also bring new and predictable patterns? Okay. So this is the journey that we want to do, right? And let me know if anyone disagrees that where we want to go is from a manual reactive stance where we're always repeating the same actions, where we're always tackling the same issues, to even preventive, right? I would go further than proactive. I would say, how can we prevent incidents? And we'll talk a little bit how we can get there. But the main point, I think there's two main variables that we need to focus on, right? Is how do we reduce the number of people that are involved in a problem, and how do we tackle it faster, right? To a point where it becomes completely automatic or we prevent the incident from happening. And so when we look at how this in the new technology and how the SRE process is evolving, we look back, right? And I remember managing SRE teams 10 years ago, and the operational cost was huge, right? And we spent a lot of time brainstorming how can we reduce the amount of unplanned work in order to get more productive things done. And so there was a lot of manual things being done. At the time, we were already all in the cloud, infrastructure as code, all of that was there, right? But still, there was a lot of not only the unplanned work would take out a lot of time, but it will also demotivate teams because all the good things that they wanted to do in terms of enablement, let's implement a new service mesh, let's do traffic shaping, all of those things, there was no time to do that, right? And then we see something coming up with generative AI, where we were able to summarize, we were able to get some productivity gains. And now, I think in the last year, we've been seeing a lot of productivity gains with the introduction of agents. And I think people are also learning how to use them more effectively. So there's some studies that recent ones that show that as there's a down curve when people start to use agents because they're still learning, and then after some time, and it depends on from person to person, they start to get benefits from using agents in order to make it more productive. Okay. So how can we think about that and apply it to how the SRE role is evolving? Okay. And when we look at the market, right, and we're not the only company that is thinking about this, there's a new category that is emerging, which is the SRE agent. Who has here tried use an SRE agent or heard about it at least? Okay. See a couple of hands. Thank you, PagerDuty folks. I'm glad that you heard about it. So there's a new category that is emerging, an SRE agent. For those that haven't tried it and the ones that have not used it, an SRE agent is an agent that is going to help with detection, the triage, the diagnosis, and the remediation of an issue, right? And different companies are implementing SRE agents in different ways. So for example, if I pick on Microsoft, which is a giant, right, and they're implementing their own SRE agent, the motivation for them to implement an SRE agent was first because they wanted to make their SRE teams more efficient. Okay. And this was just announced at Ignite last week. But then they saw, okay, there's potential for other folks to use this. It's not only internal. There's a lot of potential for other teams to use an SRE agent. Why? Because it suddenly gives me a visibility into all my cloud resources. What am I like? If you think about Azure, which is an ecosystem of resources, there's a lot of information that I want to get faster. There's a lot of collection in terms of data that is spread across multiple places. Although there's app insights and all of that, there's a lot of information that I want to collect when an issue happens. And as we've seen, time is important. How fast we can do this is very important. But we can go another level, right? If we go up another level, we can get to a point where the agent is also trying to do the diagnosis of the issue, right? So if it has the right information, and we'll talk about what is the right information, then I can diagnose the issue. And if I can diagnose the issue, which I think for me it's the most challenging part, right? then I can take action to mitigate it. However, there are still concerns. What if the agent screws up my deployments or my production environment during the night and I'm sleeping and the agent is taking action? And we asked several head of SREs, heads of engineering, etc. Would you be willing to accept that an agent will take action for you? And in Europe, in several countries, in the UK, in Germany, in France. And do you have any idea what was the percentage of people accepting or willing for an SRE agent to take action for them? Can you give me a number? 10, 5, 2%. So the answer that we got from this survey was 81% in average, which Europe is typically deemed as a conservative environment, right? Not risk adverse and all of those things. But nevertheless, people are willing to give a chance to actions that the agent can take. And I think there's different types of actions, right? There's the ones that are critical, the ones that are not so critical. If I'm reading from a log, that is not an action that will cause harm to my system in principle. But if I'm doing a rollback, I might want to consult a human for that, right? Consult someone on the other side, say, hey, is it okay if I do a rollback? There's also, when we think about information, am I doing a rollback in a critical system that is part of my critical user journey? Or am I doing a rollback in a system that if it breaks, nobody will scream. It's just an internal system, a staging or something like this. So maybe someone will scream, but not my customers. That's okay. Then I can take that action, right? If that also avoids my operational toil and it's right most of the times. So precision, accuracy becomes something that we also concern about. Are agents performing at the right level? And what if agents fail? Can I detect that? Can I react to that? And it ends up being this cycle of how can we embed SRE agents into the operations. Okay. Clear on what SRE agents are and what they can, or what they can do. Different companies, different perspectives, but a new category is definitely emerging. So what do organizations expect when we talk about SRE agents? Like faster diagnosis, right? And we just talked about it. If the diagnosis is not accurate, then there might be a loss of trust. If the agent keeps failing, then will I let it act while I'm sleeping? Probably not. Self-healing. And I see self-healing kind of a holy grail, which is if I'm able to do an accurate diagnosis, am I able to take action to do the healing? And I think there's the level, like when we talk about self-healing, there's the level of self-healing that we can get to, right? Because we have playbooks, or in most companies, there's playbooks to situations that happen, or there are well-studied response to situations that happen. And so why can't the agent benefit from that knowledge base that we already have in place? The other part that I would highlight, and I'll go back just a second, this part here of the continuous learning, right? How can the continuous learning help with the self-healing? When we have an incident, if we're able to learn from that incident, then we can feed that when the next time that happens, right? And so we can get to a point where we self-heal problems that already happened in the past because we already know symptoms, we already know what was the answer. And so there's a level of knowledge that we want not only for humans to learn in our post-instance review, but we also want for agents to learn about that, right? And then how do we get to preventive? How do we even prevent the incident from being declared, from it happening, from customers detecting it, and I'm able to detect that something is wrong or that the action I'm about to take is wrong and I can prevent it. Okay. So what do we need to make this happen, right? We call this a data flywheel tied to operations. So it's not only about observability data like metrics, logs, traces, all of that is useful, right? But is that enough? Typically I have more systems. Like I have my playbooks in maybe a ServiceNow, maybe Confluence, something like this. I have customer cases, I have customer tickets that inform what's going perceived from the customer side. I have service topology, service dependencies. Typically in a distributed system network, I have connections between two systems, can be a message queue, a Kafka that is failing. And how do I get visibility on that, right? How can I understand that something is failing in my system? And also, how can I use the incident history to take more advantage of that, right? So that if something has happened, I can take that knowledge and feed it once again to my agents. So I'll walk you through a little bit of the incident lifecycle and how we are thinking about the action of an SRE agent, right? And so we start with the detection stage. Like typically incident management lifecycle is categorized by detection, triage, diagnose, action, and mitigation in the learning stage, right? And so it's somewhat of a simplification of several things that happen during these stages. But we start with the detection, where we typically have an alert ingestion or a customer ticket that comes up. And so once we have this trigger, this signal, this is when our agents can start investigating, right? The earlier we have this signal, the faster I'm able to get agents to start acting on it, right? So this signal can be that something is going wrong or coming from my APMs or something like this, but it could also be done before, right? Because I'm putting changes into the system. If we know that 70% of the issues are caused by changes, can I do that sooner? But when that happens, when I have a problem, then I need to triage it, right? And for that, I can look first at why is this happened before? What when this happened before, what actions were taken? How does it correlate to the what happened before? Are there similar things, right? And is this something that happens regularly? Are there customer tickets in my support system? And so I can triage and I can try to understand if is this a SEV one? If this is SEV one, let me wake up my CEO. If this is SEV four, okay, maybe we can give this to an SME that will take care of this and low customer impact. So the triage becomes it's important and it's the first step. During the triage, we can also think that we could eventually categorize the problem into three pillars, right? And this is the grouping of the typical problems that happen, right? There's the well understood that we were talking about that we could fully automate because I've seen it before, it constantly happens. There's the partially understood where you have similarities between systems, similarities between services, and what can I learn from that in order to apply to this new issue? And typically, the new and novel are the ones that are most severe. When the Amazon outage happened 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, sorry, we got our SRE agent to give us a signal, right? And when we looked at the notification, it said, this is new and novel. This is something is failing, it's new and novel. So this was a signal, okay, if it's new and novel, I need to get out of bed. I need to go look at the sim. Actually, it was 7 a.m., so already awake, but I need to go and join the incident call. This is important because something is failing across multiple systems, not only at PagerDuty, but also in the whole internet. And so typically these ones are the ones where having some AI will help, but there's also a collaboration between agent and responders happening. Okay. And then we get to the stage of diagnosis. So once again, if we are able to get all the data quickly, faster, and are able to have the agent suggesting things, this will help us tremendously in getting faster to the diagnosis and correlate code changes. Was there a recent change? Was there something that can help us determine the root cause and the contributing factors? And then we get to the stage where we need to remediate, right? But before we get into the details of that, we also have an SRE agent ecosystem, as we're saying, right? Several folks are building SRE agents or have their own types of agents, right? So if we think about that, there's also an opportunity as we're doing remediation, as we're doing diagnosis, to leverage the ecosystem of agents that other folks are building. And I think this is an opportunity because, like I was giving the example of Microsoft, that they're building their own SRE agents, but their SRE agent is focused on the cloud, in the cloud infrastructure. However, that has a lot of great information that might be useful for the issue that I'm seeing. Same for Amazon or Google, right? And so if I can reach out to their agents to extract that information, that is going to be valuable for me to be able to diagnose the issue, establish root cause, and act upon it, right? And so there's an ecosystem across my SDLC, which are the coding agents that know about changes, my observability agents that know about melt data, metrics, logs, events, traces, etc. The cloud agents that know about cloud resources and know how to respond to cloud resources. And also are there agents that can help me navigate my runbooks, my playbooks that when I respond to incidents, or for example, to access my post-incident reviews from past incidents, right? And so this is where we think an agent to agent is going to be really relevant, because I will be able to extract information from multiple systems and have the agents collaborate. The cool part about this is that this can happen at the moment of detection, right? We can anticipate all this flow a lot. Typically, what happens when I join the call, first I ask, what's going on? What's the status? What systems are affected? Someone needs to repeat this over and over, right? Then I need to ask, so is anyone fetch the logs? Who has access to logs? Oh, wait, nobody has that. Oh, wait, let me go grab someone that has access to that information that we need. So this often takes a long time to get through this, right? So the speed of reaction to an issue is going to be much faster if we're able to get a collaborative mesh of agents trying to tackle the issue. So as we think about acting in mitigation, think that this network of agents will also be able to revert changes, run a more deterministic workflow, or generate or update runbooks, right? So that it gets safe for posterity what's going on. And last but not least, I think the learning stage is key, not only for humans, but also for agents, for organizations. So how long, right? How long do we take to learn from an incident? Are we following up on the actions? Are we getting that knowledge embedded into our systems? And how can agents help us go through this cycle and complete this loop? Okay. And so it should ingest that in a way that agents can consume, in a way that agents can act. And we should, and for that, I need to track symptoms. I need to track what were the attempts, what happened, how did I mitigate the issue, and so that I can prevent that from happening and do that journey that we talked in the beginning of getting from manual reactive to proactive and preventive. Okay. So how does this all work, right? We go through this stage and we're continuously gathering context. And we go through these stages, but we need to also continuously communicate to our stakeholders. And this is the part where sometimes it's often neglected. When a problem is happening and we're not serving our customers well, and there's upstream problems, right? So we have vendors that are having problems. If they're not communicating the problems, I cannot act. And so if you're a B2B, right, that creates dependencies on others, communication becomes really important, not only for internal stakeholders, for your C-levels or anything like that, but also for your customers. How can you inform them what's happening, what's the remediation, what's going on? And think that about that data flywheel that we have of information that can be not only useful for you, but also externally, right? Of course, there's differences on how we communicate internally and externally. And that is something that LLMs do quite well, right? How do I adjust the tone? How I would adjust information? All of that is, I would say, a commodity nowadays. So I want to show you a quick video of one of our engineers. And this is a real use case. When we started developing the agent, we had one of our engineers tackling an issue. But I want to show you the difference of this and like it was done before, and how the engineer is going to tackle the problem with the SRE agent. And is there audio?
Incident that happened on the SQS.
Let me put it from the
I
start.
recently interacted with the SRE agent to debug to triage an incident that happened on the SQS dead letter queue in our UAGS service. I specifically wanted to know how to redrive, how to reprocess these messages that end up in the dead letter queue. They told me it knew about how many messages were in the dead letter queue. I asked also how to sample the dead letter queue, and since it suggested to do that, and after having some conversations with the SRE agent about where I was trying to do this, it gave me the step by steps on how to do this on AWS console. And then I asked about whether this was going to process these messages. No, I just needed to sample them. And so it actually confirmed that. And then I actually found the error on the logs and I shared that with the SRE agent. The SRE agent provided its analysis that it identified the root cause. And then I asked, hey, is it really safe to redirect these messages? It told me to proceed with caution, but and to have a small batch size of messages. And then I asked again, how do I do this in AWS console? And then it told me how to do that. So yeah, that was my interaction with the SRE agent.
So this is um, so this is a case, right? When we launch our agent, of like how it changes, how we interact, how we respond to problems. And what is interesting in this example, what I found interesting is that there's a conversation, the same way as there would be a conversation between multiple humans, that where one might be have access to logs, one might have access to different parts of the infrastructure. There's a conversation with the agents in where there's recommendations, where there's a connection to playbooks, where the agent is fetching logs that might help with the resolution. And so this makes the responder much more effective, and it brings a lot of knowledge immediately in one single window, in one single interface, and it changes how we respond to an incident. And I think there's so many cases that are incredible of where we can get. We need to get to a point where this happens automatically for most of our incidents. And so I think the journey ahead is one that is definitely I'm looking for. So to sum it up, we want to move from firefighting into proactive and more preventive. We want to cut the time to resolve, prevent incidents. And of course, there's all the benefits that we talked in the beginning when we were talking about the problem. How do we reduce downtime costs, brand erosion, and of course, happy energy engineers, right? And on a clear path to a better, safer autonomy. Thank you so much. If you want to reach out, email. We have here a cool SRE agent demo that is more marketing demo, not so much a real case. I wanted to show you a more technical demo, more real case. And thank you so much for listening.
Microphone. So we have time for one question before we move to the next speaker. So anyone has one question? Okay, we have one there. So you are the selected person to do. I have to go through this way. Logistics.
Hey, my name is Nelson. One simple question for those agents. Are you using any kind of anomaly detection algorithms on top of it?
Yes. So we do two things, right? We partner with several companies that are doing anomaly detection on metrics, on logs, and several other inputs. I was giving the example of the SRE agent from Microsoft. This is one integration that we have. And there's two ways we can look at about it, right? One is you have these partners that can do anomaly detection and feed that in as an alert. You have the interaction between agents where an agent can alert you that something wrong is going on and you start an investigation, right? Or you can also, depending on your APM, your triggers, your alerts, you could kick off an investigation. And during that investigation, go a little bit further, like, why is my CPU high? Am I seeing an error message on the logs? And trying to determine if that's a real incident or not. So that could, so what I'm saying is you don't need to wait for an incident to happen to trigger an investigation or to trigger if it's a severe issue or not. In terms of algorithms for anomaly detection, we have a few that are proprietary, but we also rely on a lot of partners that just focus on that, right? Just focus, for example, on anomaly detection. You have the observability space is full of companies that are using Kubernetes operators, eBPFs, etc., just for anomaly detection, just focus on that, and they're doing it really well. So that is something that we also want to leverage from the market beyond our own proprietary ways of looking at what would be something that might be an issue. That's an excellent question. No, not yet, but definitely something we want to do. So one of the things that we talked a lot about here, what happens after we trigger an incident, right? But there's an opportunity also to shift left in how we do this. So not only when you get to production, but even before that, right? Analyze a change that is about to happen before it reaches production. Because once it reaches production, then it might be too late and you're already having impact depending on how you roll out. And so there's an opportunity to shift left and look at the CI/CD flow to estimate the probability of an issue happening. And so if you have a system that might be a mesh of service, might be something that our monolith, whatever it is, right? There's an estimation of a probability of something changing in that system to cause a problem. It doesn't need to be necessarily code. It can be a configuration change. It can be change. What we are using in seeing very good results is also the estimating correlations between past changes. So understanding what changes in the past provoked an issue, right? And so to understand also what is the risk of certain changes. So yes, definitely there's an opportunity there.
Okay, so everyone, give it up for Joao once again.
Thank you. Thank you so much.